Thank you all for coming today. I'm Jared. I'm co-founder of RevGenius. Today's topic is really close to home, being a salesperson for over 15 years, and wanted to welcome you all to today's webinar. We know that the true key to successful business is when all departments and functions work together to meet common goals. That goal being revenue in this case. So closing initial deals, renewing, expanding, it's not in dispute. What you might all be familiar with is sometimes different departments, especially ones that have to work together on specific processes, often have different sub goals and are often at odds. High performing teams work together, leaders of each department help one another reach their sub goals. And this is why I'm so amped to talk about both sales and RevOps alignment and streamlining that today. So joining us today are two leaders who've worked to solve this challenge. We have Ben Earl, the SVP of Sales, and Samantha Hannon, the Director of Revenue Operations, both of Airslate. Welcome.
Thanks, Jared.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us. Looking forward to our conversation today.
I couldn't be more excited, and just wanted to give a shout out to our sponsor Airslate today, the document automation space. They've been in business for over 14 years with over 1 million users. Their customers send combined over 100,000 automation workflows a month. So these folks know workflows. And Ben, you've been a sales leader for 15 years. And one of the major components of having a high performing team is minimizing non-selling tasks. Samantha, experienced operator, has built processes and workflows for sales teams of many sizes, and you know how to build operations at scale. So thank you both for being here today, and we could dive in.
Yeah, Sam, we didn't even plan the gray long sleeves, but
twinning, we're just that aligned. Talk about alignment.
I'm with it, and let's dive right in. So, Samantha, tell us about the evolution of revenue operations, the role specifically over your career.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want to understand like how it's changed, what's different than when you first started. I love this question.
Yeah, for sure. Sure thing. So when I first started in operations out of college, which feels like a long time ago, the function was understood as being sales ops. So purely supporting the needs of the direct sales team. And our remit included all of the classic items. So building processes, designing systems, building comp plans, commissions, owning analytics, calculating quotas for the reps, driving sales enablement, etc. And then throughout the next few years, I would say the role began to open up and evolve into revenue operations. And I do see it also sometimes being called go-to-market operations. I see them as being the same thing. And revenue operations, go-to-market operations, that's where we're focused on supporting all the pillars I listed, but for multiple revenue generating teams across the go-to-market. So that can include direct sales, of course, self-serve, if there's some sort of self-serve assist function that's in between self-serve and direct sales, channel, post-sales, so customer success, account management, etc. So direct sales can commonly be the first to come to mind still, even now, when we think about a go-to-market or revenue operations function. But these other revenue streams need operational structure and rigor as well, and they benefit from our function supporting them. And I've spent about 10 years in operations, and my personal experience has been primarily direct sales focused for definitely the first half of that, exclusively direct sales focused for the first half of that. And so I see us as still being very much in the early stages of the evolution. So organizations and individuals are familiar with the benefit of revenue operations as opposed to sales ops, but It's not necessarily standard practice across the industry. I don't see best practices fully built out yet. It's not standard yet. It's still evolving and growing. And so I kind of see us as being in the discovery phase of how does this work? How can it work better? What is the goal and purpose of this function? And where does it sit within the larger org? And like I said, I had spent probably the first half of those 10 years supporting sales reps, selling B2B only, and then gradually started being tapped by channel reps, self-serve, assist reps, partner team. And this was when I was at HelloSign, and as HelloSign was growing as an organization, and then of course even more so once we were acquired by Dropbox and our purview just became that much bigger. And I would say that was the first time I personally felt the shift from sales ops to RevOps. And there definitely was a learning curve, and I would say there still is. I'm still on that learning curve to build my understanding of how those other functions work and how myself and my team can best support them, as they are all unique from, the original direct B2B sales that we're all more familiar with. But I see a lot of exciting opportunity and kind of things coming from this evolution. So this means that RevOps as a function has more internal customers, we're interacting with more revenue streams, and we're interacting with more cross-functional partners. So now we're working even more with accounting, product, IT, engineering, getting exposure to even more parts of the marketing engine. And it also means we have a larger reach and broader impact across the org and are in a much higher visibility position within the org. So that elevated impact and visibility for me is very motivating, engaging, and fulfilling. And I would say the biggest benefit is the operations team supporting all of these revenue driving motions are working together much more closely and effectively than being siloed, which was definitely happening a lot before, still can happen, but I think less now, which allows for an overall stronger and more unified operations foundation across the company, which everyone benefits from. And so overall, I would say I've felt very empowered by the slow, gradual, but definitely moving evolution from sales ops to RevOps. And I definitely look forward to how it continues to grow and how I can continue to be a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, my question to go off this was, what was that tipping point, right? Because we all conceptually knew that things needed to be streamlined, but you had sales ops, you had marketing ops, they were doing the job, right? And it sounds like in the bigger org, you were given more responsibility or more things, but it didn't sound like you necessarily were given the marketing stuff. It was just more sales stuff. So what tipping point did RevOps come in, right? Versus just doing more of sales ops.
Yeah, and I think it's a reflection of zooming out, right? And just taking a look at the larger picture, just the company, the business itself, and the strategy to diversify revenue streams, right? And have multiple places and multiple teams and multiple channels where we're bringing in revenue. And it's no longer just, okay, we've got sales selling to businesses, we've got our website selling to consumers. Now we're thinking about, okay, how many, different areas can we create that will be able to drive revenue for the company? So that's kind of the first thought. And then the product of that is that, okay, now that we've got a couple more revenue streams and we're putting more focus into channel and, post sales, et cetera, we need help with that to be able to do that. And we need an operations team that can support all of those revenue streams. And the direct sales team isn't necessarily the most efficient or effective one all the time, right? Depending on the business. And so just having that flexibility and ability to support multiple different streams, like I said, even though them being fairly different and unique from one another. But I would say it kind of comes from that, just the bigger picture of how can we grow this business as a whole, and then that trickles down to operations. All right, that means we're growing too.
Yeah, I remember I just read something today talking about ultimately what happened as well is marketing came with their set of KPIs, sales came with theirs, and it was kind of semantics, but it wasn't literally the same. So like it was just like, okay, how do we make this one language? How do we all get on board with the same thing? Like is it what do we call it and like optimize towards that? I think that there was like a lot of signs on the way. Now, you said that you're like the space is still learning. Like what do you
Mhm.
think needs to like how can it continue to evolve? And then also the second part, like from an earlier stage company that doesn't have all of this stuff, how do you best set that up today?
Yeah, for sure. That's exactly what I was thinking as you were talking. Like we have not arrived at the end state. We're not like here, we figured it out, revenue operations, we're good to go, everybody's aligned. We're very much, like I was saying, in the early stages of what is this function? What is our purpose? Like, where do we sit within the org? And how can we actually be effective? And I think that great strides have been made over the last, 5 to 10 years from my experience, of course, but there's still so much left to do. And I think we have gained alignment for like the example being sales ops, marketing ops, breaking down those silos and having more proactive alignment and communication. I think there's been so much progress there, but I think there's so much progress left to be made still. And I'm not going to pretend that silos don't still exist. And we don't still have conversations like at the end of the second month of the quarter, and we're surprising each other about how we're thinking about the business and how we want to move forward. And so I think there's lots of opportunities still for the different kind of micro teams to continue to lean in. And I really think it all boils down to just this proactive communication and the active transparency. And just how can we start to have these conversations ahead of the quarter rather than in the quarter? And how can we structure our conversations to be productive for everybody involved and not let it get to any sort of finger pointing or kind of panicking, looking at the numbers or anything like that? How can we just kind of come as a unified front and have an objective discussion about, what our levers are for growth? And so I think that would be kind of my advice in the building blocks for a smaller org is just how can you not even let those silos be created at all in the first place so that you have to break them down. Like, how can we just get everybody, the decision makers, but the contributors together in a room on a weekly basis or whatever makes sense for the business and have those conversations all the time, as often as we can without overdoing it, so that the business just is kicked off being in a position of having those conversations consistently.
Yeah, it's chipping away at them, right? Like I think that those walls have existed in many organizations, and then depending on the maturity or the stage of the business, sometimes those lines of communication don't exist. And so in companies that I've been a part of, whether they were like earlier stage, Series A, Series B, I've seen sort of the initial, the initial stand to try to build this relationship between the go-to-market orgs is like acquisition engine meetings where you have your head of marketing, your head of sales, your head of operations, or I think Matt Cameron coined it in one of his leadership courses, like the three amigos meeting. It's like marketing, sales, and operations. Like how do those three departments come together? And I think what we're seeing now is those are really core to the go-to-market engine. But there's also a lot of opportunity to pull in stakeholders from other departments, whether that be finance or product, to give like a holistic business view.
It's natural to gravitate towards silos as well.
Yeah.
When your head's down, you need to have that Three Amigos meeting on your calendar to unsilo it, because otherwise, like, especially early stage, you're doing your job and you have the horse blinders on, which you can't have. And bringing to the next question, Ben, like, how have you evolved as a sales leader?
You mean outside of these big goofy blue light glasses that I now wear? So I've been in sales leadership since, I want to say like 2013 or 2014. So I'm hopeful that I've evolved quite a bit in those 10 years. I think one that stands out to me is more of a personal evolution, which is I'm very passionate about taking time to reflect on things. And so I really like to sit down at the end of the week and look through things that I've learned, and then specifically, like, what were the successes or the failures that I had that week. And I started this document in 2015, and it's still a G doc that I have in my personal drive, which is just called Leadership Reflections. So every Friday, I usually take 10 to 15 minutes. I sit down and I jot down something that I learned that week. And it's basically become like my work journal. It's like 97 pages at this point. And I still use it every single week. So I actually checked before I joined the webinar. My last entry was last Friday, so it was 2/24, and it was just on some observations between sales-driven versus product-driven org philosophies. But that's another topic for another time, Jared. But I find myself.
I would love to hear.
Yeah, it's a fun one. I find myself going back to this journal, and it's been really helpful in helping me answer questions or look at the problems that I've faced with today, and to think about how I've solved those previously. Because we all know, like, working in tech, especially in go-to-market teams, like, you have to clear the cache in your brain pretty regularly to fit in new stuff. And so I really like the idea of, like, taking away those wisdoms and trying to put them in a place where you can organize them, refer back to them, and use them in your career. And I think that ultimately it's made me a more grounded and stable leader, is having sort of like my journal to go back to and to reflect on what I've learned and how do I apply that in the future. So that's a personal one. And then the other evolution, which I think is more of a industry, and I think anyone in sales or operations or go-to-market orgs have experienced this, but it's the requirement of using data in decision making. I think that if I rewind 10 years, data in decision making was sometimes a nice to have, sometimes it wasn't available, so you're going more off instinct or gut. And I got into sales and sales leadership at a time before any sales analytic tools existed. So there was no Gong, there was no Clary for forecasting, there was no Atrium for rep productivity. And this was even at a time where, like, the data intelligence, BI, data visualization tools like Tableau, Domo, Looker, they were out, but they weren't yet ubiquitous in, like, B2B high growth sales SaaS companies. And so I have done my fair share of, like, manual entry into Excel spreadsheets with, like, email activity, call activity, opti volume, trying to figure out the magic formula. And I'm very thankful that those days are over, and that now we do have, accessible, hopefully hygienic data that we can make decisions off of. But I think that now that we have so many tools, it presents a new set of challenges that we have to think about. And those challenges are, we've almost swung too far in the other direction, where we didn't have enough data. Now sometimes we have too much data, and having too much data, if you don't know how to use it or look at it, can be challenging. And so the three sort of guiding principles that I have and that I've used in terms of like evolving the way I make decisions. The first is asking ourselves and our team, is this the data that we want in order to make the decision that we need to make? Because we have so much, it's easy to get lost in every single data point imaginable when it comes to sales productivity or rep efficiency. But it's really important to actually isolate and identify the data that you want in order to make that decision. And so early on, Sam and I aligned on what are the data points that we want to use and start to build a foundation for decision making by having alignment between revenue operations and sales leadership to, when we talk about rep productivity, here are the metrics we're looking at. When we're looking at booking trends, here are the underlying data points we're going to use for that report, for that graph. And so I think the first is like, make sure you have the data you want to make that decision. The second that I've seen repeatedly in my career is the self-fulfilling prophecies. So being cautious of those. An example that I've seen play out a few times is, I believe most companies now have some sort of like lead scoring mechanism. And I've seen those mechanisms often favor leads that have converted the highest previously. And so the lead scoring formula or model will be based off the leads that convert. And if built in a really myopic way, only looking at leads that convert, you kind of are predicting the obvious. You've built a model that only is going to prioritize and highly rank leads that will convert. And I think that there needs to be a step back that allows you to set up these models where it's not just scoring the good leads high and everything else low, because naturally your sales reps will only go work the high scored leads. And then there could be all this gold in the leads that you've scored low, but you just haven't put the effort or resources to, and you've built this self-fulfilling prophecy because the reps only go to the stuff that looks like the stuff that is closed. And so I think just having those things in the back of your mind when you're building models to account for any self-fulfilling prophecy that could play out and ultimately limit your ability to scale customer acquisition. And then the last one is, I think that everyone is going through a little bit of a journey when it comes to unit economics. So I've worked at companies where, like many during the tech boom, the goal was to grow at all costs. And I think that the market has just really shifted. Funding isn't cheap or easy right now, and it requires businesses to figure out their unit economics and the cost of ownership. And one of the reasons I joined Airslate is because the executive team and the board are all obsessed with unit economics, making sure that the acquisition works at the high end of enterprise to the consumer, prosumer, SMB customer base. And so, excuse me, having that data available and configured in a way that allows Sam and I to look at unit economics by different go-to-market strategies, different company size cohorts has been super valuable to the business and our overall execution when it comes to sales. And I just have to acknowledge that all of this is sort of the, Sam and her team and revenue operations are not the protectors of this data, but the torchbearers and the ones that make all this stuff possible. So I'm super grateful to have a partner like Sam who looks at these things and is responsible for maintaining the quality of them.
Ben, you stole my thunder. I was literally writing them down, and I'm like, data, yeah, right, sales, lead scoring. We have involvement.
Yeah.
Sure, I don't trust that. I don't trust us having involvement. Unit economics, sure. The people that are about to be CROs from the sales world might be on that.
Mm-hmm.
Those that aren't, please, RevOps, come help us. That great segue. Actually, we just quick question from the LinkedIn audience that I want to work in now. So we're talking about RevOps and evolving into RevOps. What's your view on the most significant difference between RevOps and sales outside of apart from RevOps supporting a wider team, commercial and even how do you view some of the core differences outside
Yeah.
of somebody's hopping on a sales call?
Oh, between sales and
And
RevOps, or
RevOps.
sales ops and
Yeah.
RevOps?
Or let's do sales ops and RevOps. That sounds a little clearer.
Okay, yeah, sales ops and RevOps. So yeah, like I was saying, tactically, supporting multiple revenue streams is kind of the obvious one, but then I see another big difference, and kind of the more primary and fundamental one is kind of your place within the larger org changing, and your role and responsibility to the company. I think suddenly your responsibility is more to uh, the go to market and the company, and not just to the sales team, right? And so that means that you can have more involvement in strategy for the company, for the go to market strategy, which we're talking about all different revenue streams. You can have more influence in decision making there, because you're kind of seen as an objective consultant, an objective third party that's offering kind of advice and insights based on everything that you've seen across the different go-to-market streams, rather than just representing one of those streams. So you're more of an advisor, kind of up the company. So to the C-suite, to COO, for example, the relationship between RevOps and COO is going to be different than the relationship between sales ops and COO. And you can have more involvement in board meetings. Again, just kind of those bigger conversations about what we're doing across the org, how we're building revenue. And so that, I think, like I said, is exciting and engaging, because it just allows you to have even more of an impact across the organization, and be able to sometimes also influence without authority across the organization, right? Because you've seen more parts of the business and been involved in more parts. And so I like to definitely use that as a lever to be able to be a part of more conversations and get more involved in the strategy and the direction of the company as a whole, kind of representing the revenue driving portions of it.
Nice. Now, you're both newer to Airslate. How did that affect or impact your ability to work together?
Yeah, I've been with Airslate for 5 months.
Yeah, I'm a little bit behind you, Sam. I think I just hit my 3-year anniversary. So yeah, still pretty new, but I think when I look at companies, and specifically in go-to-market orgs, like for me, the sales RevOps relationship is what I call the GID center, the Get It Done center. Maybe previously I referred to it as the GSD, if you read between the lines. But so I think almost immediately, Sam and I prioritize spending time with each other and getting aligned. And one of the things that really benefited us in being both relatively newer to the organization was that we had sort of an untainted view of what was going on. We weren't looking through rose-colored glasses on anything. And so bringing in a fresh set of eyes actually gave us free range to reevaluate our processes and to look at how things should be done. So I thought that was like a really nice, like both of us joining around the same time kind of put us on an even playing field of like, we're both new, we're both looking at these problems in a new light. And so I thought that was like a really nice way to kick off the relationship.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely share the viewpoint that the alignment between RevOps and sales leadership is paramount. So I made sure to connect with Ben as soon as I could and get the conversation started without overwhelming him too much in his first couple days, couple weeks at the company. I know a lot of people were trying to do that. So during those initial conversations, I made sure to ask him what his biggest priorities were, what the levers for growth he had identified at Airslate were in his short amount of time, which can be big questions for, again, someone that's very new and hasn't had time to have too many conversations yet, but that's also a great time to ask just for initial perspective. Also made sure to ask how I could best support him, throughout his onboarding and beyond. And then I also gave him an intro to the RevOps team charter and our makeup, as well as our current OKRs and the plan for next quarter's OKRs, to really start to familiarize him with our projects and also to get them on his radar so that as he was hearing about them in other meetings, he knew what they were and he could also start to represent them across the org. And I also I wasn't shy, asking for help driving a decision on anything time sensitive, and was able to provide institutional knowledge and context wherever I could to support him in this so that, the progress that the team was having was not at all slowed down as Ben was ramping up. Like, how can we work together to arrive at decisions and continue to kind of have an accelerated path going forward?
Well, this is a big thing. Ben starts, he's ambitious. There's a million things that need to get done. Infinite things that RevOps could dedicate resources to. Could. How do you prioritize what needs to be done? And, what processes do you put in place to keep the open lines of communication in case the priorities change?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, like, I think and I just wanted to also build on the fact that, like, Sam was so incredibly helpful during that ramping period. Like she said, she was giving visibility into what was active. She was providing sort of the established or the charter that she had built for her team, and was able to get me access to the information that I need to get an understanding of like what was happening in the business. And then I think one of the things that happened early on in our relationship was like, and I think that this is really critical and important to any relationship you're looking to build long term, is first, I think we got to know each other, right? Like, I remember in our one-on-ones asking questions to Sam, like, tell me about your leadership style, your operating style, like, how do you like to communicate? There's a level setting just so we know, like, how do we best engage and interact with each other? And then I think a good follow-up to that, once we've built sort of a baseline rapport of how to work together, is understanding what are the things that we want to develop and what are the things that we want to work on while we're here. So like, help guide me, like, where in operations do you like to spend the most of your time? What type of leader are you looking to become? Like, those I think are really helpful to give you sort of the long-term goal of how do you partner with this person and ultimately help each other grow. And then you were talking about, where do you start when it comes from a prioritization standpoint? I think that early on in our relationship, one of the sort of co-led exercises that we did was an audit and then a prioritization of the things that needed to get done. I've always been a big believer of work on fewer things and become maniacal about prioritization.
Mhm.
And knowing that it's okay to reprioritize down the line, especially when you're 3 or 5 months in, like, things are going to change. But you should ask yourself, what's the number one thing that we want to get done? And then once you set those priorities, like, remember that as leaders, we set the pace on how quickly we move against those. And so I think that was like a good starting point for us, is get to know each other, do the internal audit, and then start to prioritize and live by this motto, like, the moment you have many priorities, you have none. And Sam, I'll let you continue just in terms of like how we have done some of the prioritization.
Yeah, for sure. I would say that the prioritization, yeah, like you said, it's the most important, impactful part of the collaboration between us. Has been, and I think will continue to be. And there really needs to be relentlessness when it comes to priority setting and planning, but also flexibility when it comes to keeping that priority list fluid as time progresses. So it's critical that we enter a quarter fully aligned, or as aligned as we can be, on what the top levers for growth are, and therefore aren't using precious resourcing on something that is no longer important if the direction of the business has changed. But we know it's not realistic for the priorities to be set in stone ahead of each quarter every single time. So again, kind of the ability to have agility and be able to switch gears last minute is key too. And it's just as necessary to not let that, from the RevOps perspective, demotivate you and your team if you have to walk away from an initiative or redirect your team mid-quarter. That can sometimes be hard to do when you've already poured your team into a project, but you will most likely come back to it soon. So it won't be lost work. So it's kind of having that balance of, okay, what are we working on? Can we set that in stone? But then also not fully setting it in stone and having that flexibility to be able to change directions kind of at the drop of the hat if it's needed.
Yeah. And then one of the things that I think Sam and I have both seen in that same vein of like, there's going to be things that we think are set in stone, and then there's going to be this wiggle room of maybe things that we can add or things that are no longer priorities. I think that one of the things that we do in order to stay on top of that and to know where there's potentially like extra resourcing that we can dedicate to new projects, or if we're overcommitted and we need to dial back, is the documentation and tracking of progress every single week, right? It's like setting the goals and then making sure that we're talking about them consistently. I've seen it in other orgs and, across other teams where this whole idea of like OKR setting is a set it and forget it motion. I'm sure as sales reps or folks in operations, there has been times where you've been asked to do an OKR and you log into whatever platform or write it in a sheet, and then you don't even think about it until the end of the quarter where you're supposed to reflect on it. And I don't think that that's a very useful exercise. And I think Sam and I both are very big believers of, once we have set the goal, that it becomes really important to make it public, to make it known that this is what we're working on, and you hold yourself accountable to making progress against those goals. And as a result, one of the things we do is in our leadership meetings, in our sort of sales all hands meetings, in our weekly stand-ups, we are constantly talking about the progress we're making against our goals, or the lack thereof in what we're doing to fix sort of like a blocker or something that's in the way. And Sam's team has been really awesome about introducing new ways to help facilitate that through things like, project management software that create more visibility and accountability for the members who are responsible for delivering a component. And so overall, I think like that is a really big staple of our leadership style, is not just setting the OKRs, but then the measurement and tracking of them and the visibility that we provide on how are we doing against those goals.
Now, I'm always curious. You came in after she had her OKR set. You have your ideas that might be a little different, right? Like it requires some shifts. Did you just wait the 3 months on that, or 1 month until the next quarter to put it in, or how did you both recalibrate accordingly in real time? Because you don't have 3 months, certainly not 6 or 12.
Right. Yeah, the timing was interesting because I joined, I think it was the week before Thanksgiving. And so we were halfway through Q4, and the first few weeks were a lot of just like meeting people for the first time, flew out to Boston to spend time with the executives, and doing a lot of that like foundation setting for how are we going to work together. And so I had seen the goals that Sam had set for Q4. And I think my first approach was to see if there was anything that I can assist in helping her get those across the finish line. And then it very quickly became a look at what are the things that we want to sort of co-sign up for Q1. And so that conversation looked at a lot of the activities or the goals that were set for Q4 and then said, what's the next natural step on this? Or what is the thing that sales, based on the information I'm collecting every single day at this point, that we want to use to augment or adjust or make slight changes to the future goals? And so I think I came in, my approach was like, what can I help with to get these across the finish line? And then how do we start to align on what the natural evolution of these goals looks like? And I'm going to have some input. I'm going to have some questions on this, but it became more of a, like we were co-authors. I would say by December, we were like co-authoring a lot of the RevOps goals for Q1.
I like that. Now, we've talked a lot about laying the foundation, right, for setting up successful relationships between sales and RevOps. Can you tell us some of the things you've accomplished together?
Yeah, I think this is an exciting one, Sam. I feel like in the 5 months or 3 months that I've worked with you, and I know that you were very busy before I got here, there's been a lot that we've accomplished. And Airslate is a workflow automation company, and so our mission is to empower anyone to digitize and automate business processes. And so with that, we're constantly looking for ways to drink our own champagne and to do that internally. And removing friction and eliminating manual work is front and center for us, and front and center for me as a sales leader. I don't want my team's time spent on sort of like low impact activities. And so what's really great is Sam actually fits one of Airslate's customer personas. Revenue operations and operations in general is a department that gets a ton of value from our technology and from our services. And so, Sam, I think it'd be great to hear from you in terms of like, what have we been doing that is removing some of those roadblocks?
Would you buy Airslate?
Yes, totally. Yeah, I would love to do that. And maybe I can also just quickly go through my process for building OKRs and just like taking a step back again at just the OKRs and setting the goals in the first place. And then,
this is $1 million answer.
yeah, like how are we deciding what we're doing? And then can share a couple of the Airslate projects that we have. And then also, I know, Ben, I'm sure there's some that you can share as well. So my process, like I said, for building OKRs has definitely evolved and been refined over the years. And what it looks like now is I start a list in the first month of the quarter before the quarter that I'm planning for. So I try to plan a quarter out. So for example, now we are about to use the month of March to review and finalize Q2 OKRs. Rather than sitting down now for the first time to try to discuss them and decide on them, we've kind of got the draft and we're at the point where we're ready to hopefully finalize and make a final decision. And in order to, build out that list, I'm taking note of all the initiatives that are mentioned throughout the quarter in the conversations that I'm in about the current quarter OKRs. So if I hear, it would be nice if we had that, or we could build that in the future, or the next step here, or phase 2 would be this, using those organic conversations and comments as an intake process for what is floating out there as being needed, but isn't yet prioritized. And then I'm also very persistent about asking Ben and company leadership for top-down goals and priorities for the team and company. So that's important, but also conducting an exercise with my team to get bottoms-up nominations for next quarter objectives. And then hopefully being in a place where we're ready to finalize the list based on all of these inputs. So we have our must-haves, we have our nice-to-haves, since we know that OKRs should be aspirational. And of course, definitely taking into account the resourcing that we have available and the bandwidth and what's realistic for us this quarter. And definitely want to make sure that all objectives clearly map to company level objectives. I find this part to be the most powerful. This way you know that not only the initiatives that your team is working on are mapped to larger sales goals, but they're also mapped to company direction. And this gives us a very clear North Star and guarantee that the efforts that we're putting in are indeed contributing to the bigger picture of the company. And we also want to leave some bandwidth for initiatives that come up throughout the quarter so that we can accommodate them if they truly are high priority. So kind of what I was saying earlier about being nimble there. So I don't want to be the team that says, oh, we're fully booked. We can't even look at your request until next quarter. I want to be able to have those conversations and take them in real time, depending on the priority. And then once we've got that list, present it back to my team, Ben, company leadership, to gain complete alignment. And then this way, all invested parties have been consulted, are in agreement, and we can start the quarter with full confidence that our efforts will have a lasting impact. So I have found that to work and be successful personally, and it definitely takes the entire quarter to get to a place where you're starting that fresh quarter fully aligned, but it's definitely worth it to be doing it over that amount of time rather than at the end of each quarter. And then in terms of what we've been working on, so
Yeah.
we are a team of 5 RevOps at Airslate. And if we want to provide value, we can't get bogged down in being reactive to putting out fires with no protected proactive time. So the way that I know that we can provide value is through automating many of the KTLO, keeping the lights on tasks so that the team can be freed up to focus on new initiatives that will really move the needle. And this is across the funnel. So we want to get prospects in front of sellers as quickly as possible, minimize manual clicks, administrative tasks throughout the sales cycle, and make the quote to cash flow as painless as possible for us and for the customer. So a few of the small but I think impactful workflows that we've rolled out that allow us to do this, the first being the CNA form, which is the customer needs analysis form that the SDR team uses. It's created in Airslate. Once the SDR has connected with a prospect over the phone, they use the form to fill out further qualification details. And these details flow right into Salesforce systematically. And so when the AE picks up the call, all of the information is complete. It's standardized. It's in one place. And this is a time saver for both the SDRs from a kind of intake perspective and the AEs from an understanding what's going on and being brought up to speed perspective. And it also promotes clean and clear, very reliable data in Salesforce.
And one of the things we also do with that is it can then be used as sort of a recap for the prospect. So once that has been captured, generate a PDF and then have it sent to the prospect so they have a recap of the conversation, which has been a helpful follow-up tool.
Totally. Yeah, good call. That the customer facing as well. And then the second one would be using Airslate to streamline and centralize our orders process in Salesforce. So like many other companies, we used a G sheet that required manual intervention from ops to create order forms. But with this flow in Airslate, which is still a work in progress, we're iterating on it, but essentially both sellers and operations have time freed up because the process has been automated. So ops would need to touch much more order form processes, but now it's only the special order forms that need approval or that need something unique that we get involved with. And so this frees up a few hours a week from the rep and seller, or the seller and ops perspective. And another bonus is the sellers don't have to leave Salesforce. And the idea is that as long as all information in the records is accurate, the right contract is routed to the right people for approval, for signature. And this not only streamlines the process for the rep, but also greatly impacts our quote to cash data accuracy as it's automated rather than manual.
Yeah. And I know I just got my 10-minute reminder that there's a meeting coming up, so I'll keep my side quick. I mean, there's a number of other things that Sam and her team have built. Everything from auto rejection of opties on the 15th of the month for no-shows, all these really wonderful things that eliminate a lot of that redundant, lower value admin work that typically falls on the shoulders of a customer facing rep, whether that's sales, AEs, SDRs, customer success. And so there's been a lot of automation around how our systems work for us. And I think what's been really cool is that so many of these ideas come from our team of AEs. So we're constantly trying to build and foster a culture where employees are encouraged to bring ideas and solutions to the team so that we can better streamline their process. I mean, who's better to tell you what is cumbersome than the person who does it every day? So I believe that this culture at Airslate is one where folks feel really empowered to voice like, hey, this is a pretty, tiring process to go through XYZ manual steps. And we do our best to take that feedback and then put it into motion by adding it as a goal for revenue operations and sales to fix. Some of the other ones that we've built, like Sam, I know that you helped us build the Kanban view in Salesforce for AE prospecting or for forecasting. I'm sorry. We also use Gong for forecasting, but I mean, this view in Salesforce makes it super easy for AEs to like move an opportunity to the right stage and have all that information automatically updated. And so just like trying to make the lives of our team easier. And then, I think that ultimately what we're trying to do here is keep our customer facing teams working with our prospects and customers. And it's just foolish to have them, jump through all these complex admin processes to get a deal done. And we're lucky here that our sales team is actually able to close deals quite quickly. So start to finish, we have been able to implement our own technology and product and have several automated workflows in our sales process. And given that we're a Salesforce shop, one of the things I love is when a customer wants to purchase, an AE clicks a custom button in Salesforce and the Opti record, a sales contract is automatically generated with the customer info, the product information, sales price that all live in existing fields on the record. And then if the price is special for any reason, the contract gets automatically routed to the right person for approval before the customer sees it. And so we've built a lot of like conditional routing that looks at our internal deal margin thresholds and then we'll internally route for approval. It's pretty neat. It saves our team a ton of time. And overall, I think it's a lot more efficient than the typical back and forth of like generate the contract, input it, package it up, send it to someone for approval internally. You got to wait till they see it. Those processes, I've seen them take weeks, if not months sometimes. And we've been able to get that down to days, which is great.
I love the focus on optimizing against corrupted selling time. That's massive. That was like a big thing in my past lives that they never really did anything to help us with. They just told us to focus different ways. So ironic at that point, but awesome. Now, do we have time for a quick question to close? You think? What do you want to take? What's on the horizon for you two? What are you thinking about over the course of the year?
Yeah, we can definitely touch on that. And then I know there's a question about charters, so I think I can plug my answer into the chat. But in terms of on the horizon, so as Ben mentioned earlier, we're testing out some project management solutions. So we're building a project management process for the ops team to promote transparency, ownership, alignment. Ideally, we'd like to get to a place where we have an intake process where our stakeholders can independently log a ticket if they need something and can self-serve tracking of the progress and priority of that ticket rather than everything being over Slack, email, GDocs, and just getting lost. And we also in Q2 have a goal of doing an assessment of our lead to cash workflows and asking the field to help us identify additional ways to drink our own champagne, use Airslate and Salesforce internally. Even though we're already doing this to some extent, we'd like to be able to do it more. And this also promotes, sales knowledge of the product, kind of creates product feedback, which is an added benefit. And like I said, we're already doing this a little bit, but we'd like to be a bit more regimented here. So regularly asking the entire team of end users for ideas and feedback, but also consider creating some sort of a council of representatives from each team. So from AE, SDR, solutions, CSM, channel, etc., to have an even more focused approach to gathering feedback and discussing solutions together as a team. And like Ben said, getting that feedback from the field itself.
Yeah. And then just to add, we have a pretty established inbound business. The volume of users that we have, we do a lot of product-led lead generation, pretty well optimized from a surge PPC standpoint. So we have pretty established inbound motions. It's outbound that we're really building out right now, which, for me, looking at the tools, the process, enablement for consistent, predictable outbound motions is one that Sam and I have seen some good traction with early on, but we're continuing to invest at that in the outbound motion.
Thank you both for joining us today. We're right at time. This has been incredible, both on the alignment front with sales and RevOps, but also how that led to optimizing workflows using your own product. And I did notice the drinking your own champagne versus eating your own dog food did sound a lot more elegant.
I like that better.
As soon as I saw Samantha lead in on that comment, I'm like, oh, it's a team thing, and it shows the alignment, and that's so cool. And to you all, just catching the tail end, this is brought to you by Airslate, and they do over 100,000. Is that number right? Monthly automations for tons of folks, including themselves. So they've what have we learned today? We've learned how to set OKRs, how to align sales and RevOps. Samantha dropped some awesome, RevOps charter, like, right now that dropping on the side. Talk to Ben about, coming in mid-cycle. There's just been so many nuggets, and thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks for having us, Jared. This was super fun.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming, and have an awesome day.
Thanks, everyone.